In 1940, the world learned a brutal new truth. The age of the infantryman was ending. The age of the tank had begun. In just 6 weeks, German armored columns smashed their way through France, collapsing one of Europe's most powerful armies with shocking speed. The Blitzkrieg was not merely a victory, it was a revelation. Across the Atlantic, the United States watched in disbelief and dread. The lesson was unmistakable. America was catastrophically unprepared for this new kind of war. At the heart of that realization was a humiliating fact. The United States Army's best tank in 1940, the M2 Medium, was already obsolete. It was a relic of a different era, thinly armored, awkwardly armed, and bristling with machine guns instead of meaningful firepower. Its main weapon was a small 37mm cannon, barely capable of dealing with modern enemy armor. Against Germany's Panzer III and Panzer IV, the M2 was not just inferior, it was irrelevant. If war came, American tank crews would be sent into battle in machines that were already museum pieces. America needed a new medium tank immediately, not in years, not after perfect testing and refinement. It needed one yesterday. The result of this desperate scramble was one of the strangest and most compromised armored vehicles ever put into mass production. The medium tank M3. Awkward, ungainly, and unmistakably tall, its own crews joked that it looked like a cathedral driving down the road. And yet, this ugly duckling would arrive at the darkest moment of the war and prove just good enough to change its course. To understand why the M3 looked the way it did, you have to understand the panic of 1940. The US Army knew exactly what it needed: a tank armed with a 75mm gun. Such a weapon could fire a powerful, high-explosive shell for infantry support and still possess enough armor-piercing capability to fight enemy tanks. The problem was brutally simple. American industry had never built a turret capable of mounting a gun that large. Designing a new turret, testing it, and retooling factories would take years, time the Allies did not have. Faced with this reality, the Ordnance Department made a radical and deeply controversial decision. Instead of waiting, they would compromise. They took the chassis of a new medium tank design and mounted the 75mm cannon in a sponson on the right side of the hull, giving it limited horizontal traverse. On top of the hull, they placed an existing turret armed with the familiar 37mm gun. The multi-gun concept was already outdated by 1940, widely regarded as a dead end in tank design. But it allowed one critical thing: immediate production. This deeply flawed solution worked. By reusing existing components, the United States could field a tank with a 75mm gun almost overnight. In mid-1941, the result was officially adopted as the medium tank M3. It was never meant to be elegant. It was meant to be fast. Fast to build, fast to ship, and fast to put into combat. The M3 quickly split into two distinct personalities. The American version, designated the M3 Lee, featured a tall, cylindrical commander's cupola mounted atop the 37mm turret, complete with a machine gun. It required a crew of 7 men to operate its many weapons and systems. But it was not the Americans who needed the tank most desperately. It was the British. The British Army had been battered in France, stripped of equipment at Dunkirk, and was now fighting for survival against Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps in the North African desert. Through Lend-Lease, Britain placed massive orders for the M3. But British tank officers, hardened by desert warfare, immediately requested changes. They designed a new, larger cast turret for the 37mm gun. This eliminated the tall American cupola, lowered the tank's profile and, critically, moved the radio into the turret. This seemingly small change transformed battlefield command. The British tank commander could now control both the vehicle and the fight from the turret itself, without shouting orders down to a radio operator buried in the hull. With a 6-man crew and improved command efficiency, this version was named the M3 Grant, and it was these tanks that would soon be tested in battle. In early 1942, the M3 Grant arrived in North Africa just in time to face Rommel's greatest offensive. By May, at the Battle of Gazala, the British Eighth Army stood on the brink of disaster. Their existing tanks, Crusaders and Matildas, were armed with 2-pounder guns that fired only solid shot. They could punch holes in armor, but they lacked high explosive shells, leaving them helpless against German anti-tank gun positions. Rommel's Panzer III and IV tanks, by contrast, could deliver both armor-piercing and high-explosive fire. The balance was entirely in Germany's favor. Then came the shock. When German tank crews first encountered the American-built M3 Grants, they faced something new: an Allied tank with a 75mm gun. The Grant's main weapon fired a devastating high-explosive shell, capable of obliterating anti-tank guns and infantry positions. Its armor-piercing round could knock out a Panzer III or early Panzer IV from over 1,000 yards. For the first time in the Desert War, the British possessed a tank that could fight back on equal terms, and sometimes superior ones. The M3 Grant did not win Gazala, but it prevented catastrophe. Its arrival disrupted Rommel's offensive and helped stabilize the British line. More importantly, it bought time that would lead to the decisive stand at El Alamein. The M3 had finally evened the odds, but the M3 was no miracle weapon. It was a machine born of compromise, and its flaws were impossible to ignore. First was its sheer size. Standing over 10 feet tall, it was a massive silhouette on the flat desert terrain, an easy target. Second was the hull-mounted 75mm gun. With only about 30 degrees of traverse, the entire tank had to pivot to track moving targets, exposing its vulnerable side armor. To fight effectively, M3 crews were forced to use hull-down positions, treating the tank more like mobile artillery than a true maneuver vehicle. Then there was its construction. The M3's armor plates were riveted rather than welded. When struck by an enemy shell, even one that failed to penetrate, rivets could shear off inside the tank, turning into lethal fragments. This terrifying phenomenon, known as spalling, injured or killed crews without the armor ever being breached. The men who fought inside the M3 knew they were riding in a dangerous machine. Despite these flaws, the M3's story did not end in Africa. It became a global workhorse. American forces used the M3 Lee during Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa. But its most surprising service came on the Eastern Front. Over 1,300 M3 Lees were sent to the Soviet Union. Soviet crews, accustomed to the low-profile brilliance of the T-34, despised the M3's height and awkward layout. They nicknamed it the Grave for Seven Brothers. Yet even they praised its reliable engine, solid construction, and powerful 75mm gun. It played a quiet but vital role in the Caucasus and at the Battle of Kursk. The M3 also fought in the Pacific, where its high-explosive shells were devastating against Japanese bunkers, and in Burma, where British forces used it against Japanese armor. It was never loved, but it was used everywhere. The M3 Lee and Grant was never meant to win the war. It was a stopgap, a desperate answer to a desperate problem. By 1943, it was already being replaced by the M4 Sherman, a tank whose development was accelerated by lessons learned from the M3. Yet for one critical year, the M3 was exactly what the Allies needed. It was not a great tank, but it was good enough. And in the dark days of 1942, good enough was the difference between defeat and survival.